Do you need to pump a septic system when it comes to inspecting it? We're going to talk about that today. Today's viewer question is going to centralize around that topic. They want to know, do you have to pump a septic system in order to inspect it? You're going to hear some arguments that some people say that you need to, and that's the only way to inspect a system. And then you're going to hear people like me who argue you don't need to pump the system. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about why for both, and then we're going to go through the reasons for why I don't think you need to. So the very first thing we have to talk about is testing methodology. And when it comes to a real estate inspection, the first thing you have to look for is the liquid level in its natural state. You don't want to have a system pumped before you get there because you may not see that it's backed up, you may not see that the water level's low, you may miss some stuff if it was pumped before you started the inspection. So you open up the lid, you take a look, and you say, all right, the water level's exactly where it should be, which is always at the invert of the outlet, so the bottom part of the pipe, basically about a foot from the top of the tank to the top of the water. Now, when it comes to pumping, what most people will argue is you want to pump the tank in order to see if it's leaking. And that can help, but what happens if the hole is about the size of a dime? You could have a leak where you're losing 2-3 gallons a minute, and those tanks are pretty large. At least in our area, most tanks are 8 foot by 4 foot, sometimes they're 10 by 5, and sometimes they're 12 by 6, so they're rather large, about the size of a small car. So if you pump the system and you look inside with a mirror, all you're going to see is black. You may see that there might be rebar, maybe, but you're not really going to be able to see the hole or the leak point. Now, where I see leaking tanks all the time is once you open up the lid, you can see the water level's low, or you'll see water's flowing. What do I mean by this? So if you open up the tank and the water level's significantly lower than where it should be, for example, the middle of the tank, and you haven't pumped the tank recently, the only way the water level is going to go down is if it's leaking. The same can be said when it comes to water infiltrating the system. So that's why part of like our process when it comes to an inspection is we like to get the outlet side of the system dug up so we can see, all right, I'm not running water in the house, we're not running water from a spigot, but water's leaving the tank. So that means that water's getting into the system in some way, shape, or form, whether that's through the risers, through the lids, maybe a mid-seam, but water's flowing into the drain fields and causing problems. Typically, we don't see that as often. The most common thing we're going to see is going to be when you open the lid, the water level's super low because it's leaking at the mid-seam. Now, I've caught plenty of septic systems that were leaking where people who pumped the tank called it good, and then I come back and we do a normal test without pumping it, and you can see immediately that it's leaking. Now, you may be wondering, well, how do you test that? That's a good question. Usually when it comes to somebody, like let's just say that they say it's leaking or I say it's leaking and somebody else says it's not, what you want to do is you want to fill it up, right? So if I know it's a 1,000-gallon tank, I will bring it to the correct level by putting in however much water it takes to get to that 1,000-gallon mark, whether that's 1,000 on total or maybe 1,200 gallons. We bring it up to the correct level. Then you let it sit. Basically, you come back the next day or maybe the day after that and you look, did it drop? And if it drops, boom. Problem solved. You know the answer is that it's leaking. If it doesn't drop, then boom, it's not leaking. Beyond leakage of a tank, people are going to also say that pumping it helps you with structural integrity of the system. Now, a leaking tank also has structural issues, but it's a different kind of structural issue. So usually what you'll hear people say when it comes to pumping is that by pumping it, you're able to see if there's rebar. And maybe, it depends on the condition of the tank, but typically most of your corrosion is going to happen in the top portion of the tank because that's where all the sewer gas sits. Sewer gas is incredibly corrosive, and so basically it chews up the concrete. It eats up the concrete so much that it literally just starts falling apart, and eventually, if it eats it up enough, it just turns to mush. The mushing of the concrete is essentially how concrete baffles fall off, and that's why we don't really use concrete baffles anymore. Most concrete baffles are going to be manufactured with the tank, but nowadays we use Schedule 40 PVC. That stuff ain't going anywhere. So if you are pumping the tank to look for rebar, and the most common place for rebar to be exposed is on the top of the tank, you can see the rebar without having to pump the tank, right? In my opinion, I think a lot of the pumping is an unnecessary expense during the process of the inspection. I think that you should pump regularly, right? Every 3-ish, maybe 5-ish years. Sometimes a little bit more if you have more people living there, sometimes a little bit less if you have less people living there, but you still want to get it pumped out regularly. I don't think for an inspection that you should force a pumping. Now, there may be an argument that most people aren't pumping their systems, so by regulating and forcing a pump during an inspection, it helps to clean the system and basically give the buyer a clean slate. There could be an argument for that, but when you're doing a test without pumping it, you have a sludge judge, which is a fancy pole that you stick into the water, and that can help you figure out what your layers of solids look like and how much you have. By using a sludge judge, I can tell you, hey, it's due for pumping now. Let's just say, it's at 30% of capacity. Now it's time to pump. But let's say that you pumped it last year, and then now you're inspecting it for a real estate transaction. Well, you don't have enough solids. Why would I make you pump it again? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, the one time I do think it's important to pump the tank when it comes to inspections is if there's no vent hole over the inlet baffle, or you have limited access to see inside the tank. So for example, most older systems will have a clean out over the front of the tank. Oftentimes, in that clean out, you're going to have a baffle as well. The inlet baffle. Makes sense. But on that top part of that baffle is going to be a hole, about the size of a softball. And that's going to allow the gases to vent and go its way up through the pipes, through the roof of your house. All that good stuff. Some old systems didn't have that. Sometimes you get unlucky and toilet paper gets blocking up in that hole, and sometimes the clean out can sink lower than that hole, and you can't see into the system. So by pumping, what you can do is you can remove all the water, and then you can extend your mirror further into the tank and look under the baffle and back towards the outlet side baffle. Checking for the outlet side baffle is the most important thing whenever it comes to an inspection. The reason why is that's what's going to prevent all of the floating scum from getting into the drain fields, the outlet pipe, distribution box, and ultimately causing a clog and sewage maybe going into your house, which is not fun. By pumping that type of system, that does help you with the inspection. But I don't think that should be a requirement, right? I think that's one of those tools that you can use in the event that something's not accessible or that you can't see something. So it will help you as the inspector do what you need to do, but I don't think it should be relied upon as the end-all be-all. For example, we have some systems that are 11 feet deep. Pumping a tank at 11 foot, it's not going to help you see below the baffle unless you have an incredibly long pole. Typically, you would want to get a machine, dig up, get a riser, or just dig up everything to get to the tank itself and then fix it if necessary. In all, I do think there are some values to pumping a system during an inspection. I don't think it should be required, and I strongly disagree that you can't inspect a system without pumping. And as I've said, I think that the pumping is a tool, not the end-all be-all. Majority of your leakage that you can see completely without pumping. You just have to look at the outlet line or just get used to exactly where the liquid level is supposed to be. Alternatively, let's just say you don't want to just go by that. Well, all right, if you open up the tank and the water level is really low, like I said, you just fill it up, come back the next day, did it fall? Boom, problem solved. Now you know it's leaking. I think pumping just increases the cost for no real benefit to a buyer. And, you do what you want to do, make smart choices, and ultimately, sometimes some counties will require it. You may not have a choice. Like, for example, in Pennsylvania, you got to do it. There's no option. That's part of the rules. Maryland, not quite that way. Your state might be different, and that's okay. We all do things a little bit differently. But let me know down below, do you agree with my ideas and my opinions? If you strongly disagree, feel free to let me know. As usual, I have videos posted every day on the World of Well and Septic. If you found this one interesting or useful, you know what to do. Till next time, guys.